Hey everybody, welcome to Tuesday night's after show. Not the after show, it's the countdown show on Narrative Live. My friend Noel Casler is here, the brilliant comedian. How are you, Noel?
I'm excellent, Zev. Thanks for having me. I'm happy to be back.
It's great to have you back. You know what? I keep forgetting to tell people about your incredible podcast, which is hilarious. You should tell people what the name of it is and where they can find it.
Thank you very much, Zev. It's Noel Casler Podcast. You can find it wherever you get your podcast, Apple, Spotify, Podbean. And it's me kind of breaking down the week's events in a more comedic and ranty fashion than we do on shows like this. So check it out sometime.
You do good rant. If anyone does good rant, it's you. Blown away this evening by the fact that now Kevin McCarthy is saying he's opposing any commission to investigate the January 6th insurrection or coup. I think it should be called the coup attempt, at least. What do you make of that? I think it's pretty remarkable that the entire party is now being whipped into voting against any commission to investigate this historic event.
Exactly. Further profiles in cowardice. Kevin McCarthy obviously is the guy who had allegedly the screaming phone call and found a backbone on the afternoon of January 6th, for a brief moment in time. But I think Kevin McCarthy knows that he would be the first one to get thrown under the bus if they did have that investigation. I think that he obviously he and the rest of the Republican Party were somewhat complicit in what happened in January, and I think he knows they would make him the scapegoat. It would lead to his demise. So he really has no choice but to come out against it. But here's a guy, he participated in 70 Benghazi hearings.
That's a good point. It's interesting that Liz Cheney threw him under the bus for sure on the weekend. Yeah. She was like, there's a reason he doesn't want this commission because he has to testify. And it's absolutely true that he is, we have him on tape. I might play that tape later on where he's like, he was in this. He was part of the reason this all happened. The entire insurrection the big lie was part of McCarthy. Kevin McCarthy. I'm sorry, I'm losing my brain. Kevin McCarthy's project for the year, and he seemed to have done. If he was getting scored for anything, he would have gotten high scores for that. Coming up at about past, the amazing Sandi Bachom is going to be joining us. She's done an incredible TikTok of the day, especially at the moments the Capitol was initially breached. And it's kind of remarkable when you look at it by minute, especially those initial moments of that breach from the outside, because it's so clear. This is a military operation, or at least a military style operation. I'm not saying the military was involved necessarily, although I do believe they probably were. But, in terms of the way it was executed, we're going to show you how within 5 to 10 minutes, the entire Capitol was breached from all sides, according to Sandi's timeline. So we'll get to that a little bit later on. But we're counting down the top stories of the day, which means we're beginning with story number 4. And we're starting tonight with Bill Gates coming undone. This is your story, Noel. So tell us about it.
Well, I just think it's a remarkable story. I mean, the revelations that came out in the New York Times piece on Sunday about Melinda French Gates, they're being careful to use, her maiden name now in all press reporting about her. I think it shows a few things, and the most alarming was obviously his connection to Jeffrey Epstein, which happened after he became friends with Epstein in 2011, after Epstein accepted his plea deal in Palm Beach and did his sentence for sex trafficking. A lot of these guys were, hey, I didn't know he was doing any of that. We go way back in business. Bill Gates can't even make that excuse,
No,
and he brought his right.
He knew, and he lied. He lied so much about the extent of their friendship because he kept telling people that he only met him a couple of times, even denied going to the mansion. But in reality, there was not only mansion visits, there were plane trips all the way to Palm Beach and elsewhere. And he denies it was Epstein's jet. He didn't know whose jet it was on. So it's also kind of stunning that Jeffrey Epstein was encouraging him to end the toxic marriage that he was in. Apparently, he was coaching him on ending that toxic marriage. I mean, this is, that building, that house. You've described it to me before, not because you've been in there, but it was right near where you lived in the Upper East Side there. That townhouse was almost a brothel, maybe kind of a brothel, but certainly a gentleman's club.
No. It was a brothel. It was a
Wow.
billionaire's brothel. It's no mistake that the Koch brothers live at 740 Park. The servants' entrance is just on the other side of Madison, down by Park Avenue. You know, there's a lot of Howard Lutnick. All these guys live, you know, Howard Lutnick lived next door. You know, it was a hangout for wealthy businessmen. And I've never been in that house. I know a woman who has been associated with Trump since she was a kid and would skate at his rink, and he would hit on her and he called her his dirty uncle and stuff, who fell into that world, who worked in that escort world and had been in his house many times. And I don't even go there with her because I don't even want to hear the stories. But what she would say to me was like, you do not want to imagine the things that those guys did to women in that house. You know, you don't even want to, right. So there's no way Gates didn't know about it, Bill. And he brought his wife there for dinner. And that was apparently, according to the New York Times article, one of their big falling out was after he brought her to dinner with Jeffrey Epstein. And afterwards, Melinda Gates was like, that guy's a creep. Like, there's no way we're hanging out with that guy again. You know, and Bill Gates continued to hang out with him. And back to your earlier point, like he's trying to claim, I didn't know like whose jet it was. There is no way a guy like Bill Gates gets on somebody's private plane without knowing exactly who it belongs to. If not for him, for the amount of security you have to have being at that level. Can I say, I was at Paul Allen's house once. Paul Allen was a big music fan, and he would invite rock stars over to his house to jam with him. And he had has a museum, or had a museum in Seattle. So he did this big benefit concert, and he flew up Crosby, Stills and Nash and like Belinda Carlisle and all these artists. And we got to hang out at his house.
Fun.
And he had like this great, it was awesome. He had this great recording studio, and he had a party and stuff. And at one point in the evening, I was like, I'm going to wander around a little bit. You know, I'm going to go see the main house, you know? So I wander out of the studio area, and I see this glassed in room with all these like fancy cars, like behind glass with spotlights on them, like Bugattis and Ferraris, Bugattis, all these like super fancy cars. And I'm like, wow. And I go to myself, I said, it's amazing a guy's this rich and he doesn't have any security around. And I take another step towards that building, and a dude came out of the bushes. Like he had such a level of security that they were just behind the bushes. He had like Mossad agents on the ready.
You know, that's an interesting point, the Mossad agent thing. Right. But we should take a look here at this photograph. This is inside the mansion. You know, this looks like a respectable group of people. They're not looking anything bad at all there, of course. This guy there from, I think, JP Morgan. Is that correct? I can't see that correctly. But Larry Summers, the former Treasury Secretary there. There's Epstein in the middle, then Bill Gates. And then there's this dude on the very right end of the picture, which is a critical person when it comes to the Gates-Epstein relationship. And there are two people that are very important to the Gates-Epstein relationship. We'll get to them in a second. But, you know, what do you make of this picture first? You've got a bunch of guys hanging out. It doesn't look like it's that salacious or complicated.
Yeah, well, you're seeing the picture in the foyer. You know, that's where they pose for the picture when they come in the door. You know, you're not seeing the picture upstairs in the room. You're not seeing the picture of Bill Clinton dressed as a woman. You know, the big oil painting that hung on the wall. You're not seeing all the nudes that Epstein kept and collected of pubescent girls, of teenage girls everywhere. So the massage room. So what I see in that picture is what Epstein was a master at, which was getting very powerful men around him, making sure there was a picture taken while he was in their presence, because that becomes currency in that world. Oh, yeah. You know, I got a picture of you standing in my hallway. You know,
right. So you don't even have to use that. You don't even have to say it. People know that they remember they took that picture. So then they're sort of stuck. They're compromised just from the very start because they took that picture. So, you know, once the rumors start coming out about what you're really doing, it doesn't matter whether you did or didn't do anything in there. Your photo is there already, and he has it.
Yes, and that what happened in that townhouse was no secret. And that block itself has a long history of that. It was poker rooms and brothels. That, you know, East 71st between 5th and Madison has long been a playground of sorts for uber wealthy guys to go and do that sort of thing. And, you know, I've talked about it before. I won't go into it, but just next door in May of 19, you know, Howard Lutnick had that big fundraiser, right before Epstein got busted. They had a big fundraiser for Trump. They raised $35 million. There was like 30 guys there. It was Steve Wynn. It was Rudy Giuliani. You know, it was everybody who probably partied at Epstein right before Epstein got popped. And they called him back together and said, hey, you know, he's not in the clear. Right. Pay up and we'll make sure Barr takes care of this, because we all know we've been next door. We all know what we did, and we all know we don't want anybody hearing about it, you know?
Yeah. Side note: on the way into the show, I saw that Andrew Giuliani is now running for governor of New York. So that'll be interesting to watch.
Yeah.
This is Rudy's son. But let's get back to this interesting guy. So there are two people in between Jeffrey and Bill Gates that were facilitated that relationship. One of them was Melanie Walker, a neurologist. Originally, she was a model, apparently. She met Jeffrey Epstein at a young age. She promised he'd make her a Victoria's Secret model. I don't know if that ever happened, but he stayed in his orbit for a long time before she joined the Gates Foundation. That's where she met two people inside the Gates Foundation. One was Boris Nikolic, who is a Croatian was the science advisor to Bill Gates, and a very, very important guy, because ultimately he ran a bunch of funds involved in the gene industry. And so they funded a lot of gene splitting and that kind of stuff, which was a big interest to Jeffrey Epstein. She also met her future husband, who was Stephen Sinofsky, who was in charge of Windows, in charge of Outlook, in charge of all of those things. And she also met Prince Andrew. I was desperately trying to avoid a royal reference tonight, but I couldn't do it, because there is Melanie Walker and Prince Andrew dating each other for a long period of time. In fact, Ghislaine Maxwell and Jeffrey Epstein went on a couple of double dates at Windsor Castle with Melanie Walker and Prince Andrew. So it's, they all know each other. That's for sure. This is not just I met him a couple of times. What's interesting to me is people forget that Jeffrey Epstein was primarily a spy. Yes, he was doing all these other things, but he was a military intelligence spy, an asset for the Israelis, and he also worked for, we believe, through an intermediary with MI6. So think about that. He's got people inside the most powerful computer company in America. He's got people inside right near the very top of that company, right next to Bill Gates, who have capacity to access Windows and Outlook. And if you remember back then, those were big deals. I mean, people still use them, of course, now. But back then, that was the only game in town. Plus, he had all this money flowing through Boris Nikolic into these funds, which presumably we're going to find out sooner or later were funding all sorts of who know what schemes. I think what might be going on here is there's a lot more shady business to be discovered between Bill Gates and Jeffrey Epstein, and around this whole arrangement with all these people in Windows. I mean, is it possible that there was a spy cell inside the Windows company? It wouldn't surprise one. It's not unthinkable. It certainly looks like if Melanie Walker, if she's not only a neurologist, maybe she's also like Jeffrey Epstein, an asset of another country. Maybe she was spying. It's quite possible. So I think there's going to be a lot of intrigue built into this. And it made me rethink the whole divorce. It made me think, maybe they're not divorcing because they've just had it with each other and she's tired of his womanizing, because she knew about this. She knew he was a bit of a philanderer. Or, she even had a clause in her marriage agreement that allowed him one dirty weekend a year with an ex-girlfriend. I mean, if you're going to allow that, you sort of are accepting of the fact that he's got a wandering eye. So then maybe they're divorcing not so much to divorce, but just to protect the assets, because, she gets half of it. At least they can keep half of that. What if Bill gets into real trouble with all this other stuff that we're learning? It certainly seems like the board was unhappy with him, with his philandering. Now we're learning, that there's all these different connections to various people associated with Epstein and Andrew. That doesn't begin to look doesn't look so good.
Absolutely. And there's also, it's an interesting point you raise, Zeb, because it would be a way to protect at least part of the fortune, at least half of it. And their sort of capital management, their wealth management fund was run by a guy who's also drawn into this scandal, who was apparently sexually harassing an employee at a bike store, which was one of their holdings in Seattle. That was in the Times piece on Sunday, that the guy who's in charge of their main fund, like $114 billion or $17 billion or whatever, that they invest all throughout the country in properties and hotels. The guy who's done that gig for 20 years was apparently a real creep and sexually harassing an employee. And apparently Melinda took umbrage to that because they ultimately exonerated the guy, and Bill took his side. But you make a valid point. It could be a way to protect the enormous wealth and assets of the Gates. And They would know, if a lot of that,
they would know.
Right. If it's going down, they would
have
know
an
they
inkling.
got to hide some of it. Exactly.
It's really interesting. I'll just say one other thing quickly about Boris Nikolic. He, 48 hours before Jeffrey Epstein died, I believe, he rewrote his will. And Boris Nikolic was the guy he said would be the backup executor of that will. So that's really unusual thing to do anyhow. You're in jail, you've been arrested, you might have an inkling you might be dying in the next few days. So you rewrite your will and you include this guy, Boris Nikolic, who's a good friend of yours and Bill Gates, without telling him apparently. Because Boris Nikolic says he only found out after the death that he was the backup executor. And we know there's like $600 million in that estate. He chose not to execute it, but obviously Epstein must have trusted him enough to do that. I mean, you wouldn't just hand over the keys to $600 million unless you were sort of comfortable that the person you were handing over the keys to knew all the shady stuff that was involved in that 600 million, because there was a lot of shady stuff involved in it.
Absolutely. And nobody really still knows how Epstein made his money. Here's a guy who did 2 semesters at Cooper Union, went to work at Dalton for Bill Barr's father, then went to work for Ace Greenberg. And then all of a sudden, everybody's like, Les Wexner and all these guys are giving him their money and letting
Leon
him,
Black.
Right. Leon Black, perfect example, who comes up again in this Times piece. And Bill Gates. What is Bill Gates taking advice from Jeffrey Epstein for? Like Bill Gates is supposed to be one of the great geniuses of our time. He doesn't have his own accountants.
Yep.
He doesn't have his own people, even in the marriage advice. You're taking advice from a guy who's already done a prison sentence in Palm Beach for prostituting teenage girls. That's who you're going to ask about.
And there was never anyone really inside the Jeffrey Epstein organization that was actually doing the work. I mean, there was a few people there, but they weren't operating like a typical financial firm. They were just, managing money, but not in a typical way. And we do know that there is a lot of money that was made off arms trades. And I have a very good idea of how the rest of the money was made. But that I'm going to reveal at a later stage in a narrative's future. But there is a roadmap there, which is quite clear about how the money was made and spent. And maybe one day soon, I'll get to tell it. Now, should we say anything about Bill Gates? Anything else you want to say about this Bill Gates and Melinda Gates, Jeffrey Epstein scandal?
Well, seeing, and I'll let it go till the later episode, but seeing how like Bill Gates is caught up in this thing too makes it so much more insane that Epstein died in prison. The amount of secrets that Epstein would have had on things that would be seismic. The revelations would have been seismic if he could have come out against somebody like Bill Gates, let alone Donald Trump, which everyone assumes is why he was, murdered by Bill Barr, which at least I think what happened. I don't think.
Well, I don't know if it's necessarily Bill Barr, but it certainly may have been allowed by Bill Barr. I mean, it may have been.
Right. Exactly.
I don't. Who knows?
I'm not even talking about the physical way the guy died.
Yeah.
I'm trying to make the point like that guy's got to die. Like he's in custody. Oh no, it's not just Trump he has secrets on. It's Prince Andrew, it's Bill Gates,
everybody.
It's half of the financial titans of the world. Like he had to go. It's a miracle Ghislaine Maxwell is still breathing.
It is actually a miracle. But it's really interesting. You make such a good point there because what Epstein did was he worked his way into all these core inner circles of the most important people in America. This was not by accident that he became friends with Bill Gates or by accident that he became friends with Bill Clinton. He worked his way up there. And to Trump, so this was his mission. This was his goal. They were coming to America to, entrap and get compromise on American business leaders and political leaders so they could control them. Now, we don't know to what extent they needed to control them and why, but, it appears that they got very close to everybody. What did they do? Who knows? Because there's not really an account of blackmail. I haven't yet seen anyone say, hey, he blackmailed me. But who knows? It may not be the blackmail in your typical fashion. I've got something dirty on you. Maybe it's just blackmail, financial kind of blackmail, or hey, we'll pay for this, we'll do something for that. Don't let a friend down. It doesn't have to be so overt that hey, I've got the dirty pictures. But who knows? All right, let's get into you can finish that one thought if you want.
Well, it's no coincidence that the Russian consulate is up on 91st Street too, between the same two blocks, you know, which was known as the spy consulate, where somebody died the night of the election in 2016. Like, if you were collecting compromise on people in Jeffrey Epstein's mansion, there would be no better neighborhood to hand off that compromise in, you know, in the middle of the night on Fifth Avenue, when you go sit on a park bench and another spy sits next to you and then walks back to the Russian consulate. I know that sounds crazy, but because
No,
here's why. I live in that neighborhood. And in the weeks after Epstein was murdered, the only news crew that was outside of his townhouse was RT, was Russian news, whatever it's called, RTN or whatever. The guy was standing there for weeks reporting in front of the townhouse, waiting for his live hit. And I'm like, why are the Russians so interested in Epstein's townhouse? Nobody else was there. The Russians were there every day for weeks.
Noel, you are the king. You know why you're the king? You're the king of segues, because here we are talking about Russia. It's story number 3 in our countdown. This is really interesting. This gets a little, this is putting my foreign strategy hat on. So I apologize to people if I'm going to bore you a little bit. But, there's a conference going on, which is arguably the most important conference in the world right now. It's the Arctic Conference. It's basically all the countries that have any say around the Arctic all meeting together. I think it's in Reykjavik. And what they're doing is two things. They're handing over the chairmanship from the Chinese to the Russians, which is significant. I don't know why China is really an Arctic nation, but apparently they are. They don't really touch the Arctic, but the Russia does. And, if everyone's been watching me for a while, you'll know that I've argued for a long time that what we're really seeing is a long-term play to take over the Arctic, a battle for the Arctic. And so Lavrov, the foreign minister for Russia, arrives today, and he basically right off the front says, this is our land, our waters. The Arctic is our land and our waters. And it's basically a warning shot to America to stay away, for NATO to stay away. The only piece of this Arctic that really touches America is Alaska, of course. And there's a lot of thoughts that certainly Lavrov has said in the past, and he may have even said so today, that they believe Alaska still belongs to Russia, and that they believe that they have some claim over Russia. So that's an interesting and, complicated thing to digest. Now, why is it so important? You have to sort of go back and look at what's going on externally. And I'm going to do that by taking you through to what Russia does elsewhere. This is Russia in Ukraine. You remember they've taken over parts of eastern Ukraine with these 2 really big army regiments over there, making it very hard for people to possibly, evict them from where they are. So they're looking to take over the entire Ukraine, but they're doing it in a very selective way. And this next slide, I'm going to just show on the big screen here, because it shows you really what their strategy is. So it's really hard to read, but I can sort of take you around a little bit here. So you've seen the 2 parts of the eastern side of Ukraine that they've taken over. That's a significant batch of Ukraine that they've done. Now, on the very far left, you can't really see it or read it there. Maybe you can. It says Transnistria, which is a part of Moldova. Also, the Russians control that little piece. The part in yellow near the top, that's Belarus. Also really controlled by the Russians, even though they pretend to be independent. They're not really. The Donbass is part of that eastern chunk of Ukraine that I already told you about. But this dark gray section over here, that dark gray section is at the very bottom of it. You see these 2 red little dots. That's Abkhazia and South Ossetia, 2 places again. This is Georgian territory where the Russians are really in control there. And then it's really interesting what this slide says, and I'll put us back on screen here so you can, there we go. So it says, this is what Russia goes after. This is from the Estonian Foreign Spy Service, essentially, the intelligence service. It says, what Russia is interested in is controlled instability. It is in Russia's interest to keep its neighboring region in a state of fragile balance. Therefore, Russia wants to see the following features in its neighboring countries and seeks to maintain or help instigate these: limited development of the rule of law, absence of free elections, repressed civil society, limited relations with the West, territorial conflict with Russia as the kingpin, and then Russian troop presence in the form of military base or otherwise. So it got me thinking if you apply all those things to Alaska, I mean, sure, we still have free elections here, but we're not exactly not in a state of fragile balance. I would describe us as quite adequately as being in a state of fragile balance. So if you look at what Alaska looks like today, they have, wait a sec. Pull up these things. Just say something for a little bit here while I try to find this. Might have
Well,
played
it's
more.
just fascinating. It's fascinating stuff. And also today, Biden lifted the sanctions on the Russian businessman who was building the pipeline, I believe, to Germany. Part
Oh,
of
he
the
did.
Ukrainian sanction. Yeah, he lifted the Novo. I can't pronounce it. I don't speak Russian, but the
Interesting.
Novo guy or whatever. Right.
And
so
is that going ahead? I wonder if it's still going ahead because
I
Germany
think
and
it is.
Russia are very, very close to each other. It sounds like if the sanctions are being lifted, they really are. I can't find the slide I was looking for, but I'll basically explain it to you. So you've got Russia. This is Russia on the white. So the white side here is Russia. America's in that Alaska section in the gray there. The rest is Canada. They have built a ton of military bases all along this little green line over here, including all these little islands, these tiny little islands you see here. One is 300 miles away from the Alaskan coast. It has a full air force base with a capacity to land planes. It's got massive radars built in it. I mean, they've got so many new forces along the edge here that it's kind of incredible what they've done. And it makes me wonder whether they're playing out their sort of the same strategy that they're doing in Eastern Europe and their neighboring countries, whether they're going to do it to their north, which is really us, and they're going to start playing around with Alaskan independence and whether Alaska should really belong to them, maybe even breach Alaska. And suddenly, we'll be at the tipping point of a war. We won't necessarily go into one, but it'll create enough, what do they call it? Fragile imbalance or controlled instability to really keep America sort of hunkered down for a period of time. So that to me made me think that, the Arctic conference that's going on right now just started today. Pay attention to it because it might have really important implications down the line, especially for Alaska. I mean, no one thinks about Alaska that much, which we should, of course, because it's a beautiful, beautiful state, but it's ours, and they don't think it's ours. They want it back. So that might be happening in the near future, worth keeping an eye on. Not necessarily the most happiest of news, but there you go. On the upside, I did find out that that Putin is incredibly unpopular right now in Russia. That his election, his polling, international polling, is down around the 30% mark. And I was glad to hear that. So there you go.
Yeah, well, you're not the polling guy.
Right. You might find a window.
Exactly.
Polling guy, need window. It's quite possible. Hey, Noel, we have to take a break. On the other side, we are going to talk to the amazing Sandi Bachom, and we're going to analyze what happened on January the 6th. By minute, it's going to be a fascinating conversation. And Sandi's standing by, I hope. And I am going to try to find this right video that I have to play. There's a lot of moving pieces here. How was your weekend? Tell me something about your weekend.
It was good. I had a really good weekend. I got my hair cut. I got my second flu or vaccine yesterday. So that was a momentous occasion. Yeah.
It's very nice. I'm yet to get my first. I'm getting it
this
week.
Yeah. Well,
coming
it's nice.
soon.
I feel,
Anyhow,
I feel good too. I didn't get any of the side effects.
Are there side effects? People have said to me there might be side effects and I should be aware of them. Are there?
I didn't feel any.
That's good to know.
I didn't. Yeah.
All right, we'll be right back with Sandi on the other side of this.
You got it.
Tonight's show is brought to you by Helix Sleep, and they have a special offer for narrative viewers.
I've heard it from so many people. The one thing that's changed since January is their sleep. Not waking up worrying about what the president might have done or said or tweeted makes the world of a difference. I don't think I had a good solid night's sleep in 4 years. And it wasn't only the president. My 10-year-old mattress, which started life as a 12-inch foam mattress, had shrunk to an 8-inch mattress, and getting out of bed was often more of a slide than a bounce. It was time for a new mattress. Helix Sleep has a quiz that takes just 2 minutes to complete and matches your body type and sleep preferences to the perfect mattress for you. Why would you buy a mattress made for somebody else? Changing the course of a country can take a village. Changing the course of your sleep takes a quiz. Helix is offering up to $200 off all mattress orders and 2 free pillows for our listeners at helixsleep.com/narrative. That's the way we spell narrative, N-A-R-A-T-I-V. That's helixsleep.com/narrative for up to $200 off and 2 free pillows just for you. And they're great. They're great. Great beds. Everyone should get a mattress like that. They're really fantastic. Hi, Sandi Bachom. It's so nice to see you.
Hi, guys. You guys are so smart. You make my head hurt.
Oh,
I love listening
Noel makes
to
my
you.
head hurt because he also knows everybody. It's not that he's just so smart about everything. He knows everyone we're talking about all the time. And it's like, wow, how do you even keep a memory of all that? But He's good at that.
You know, I was in. Speaking of Epstein,
Yeah.
I'm kind of an expert. I was at a stakeout at the fundraiser.
Oh, that same
Trump's
fundraiser.
fundraiser, right? And his neighbor across the street is Bill Cosby.
Yep.
Yeah,
I was
really?
going to mention
Did you know that? Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
And the guy from, he was the crying, after 9/11, he was the crying CEO.
Howard
Lutnick, right? He lost everybody in his next door.
Yeah.
Right. That was where the fundraiser was.
And Howard Lutnick bought his townhouse from Jeffrey Epstein's brother. Epstein's brother brokered that deal.
Really?
Wow.
Yeah. And
I
was there.
He knows everybody, and he knows everything.
Yeah.
I was there that night too. So I saw you, Sandy, because I rode my bike by, and I said, "What's going on?" Yeah,
I didn't know you then.
Because I go to a meeting down the street and I happen to be like right on Madison, 70th and Madison. So I happen to go by, and I said, "What's going on?" And they're like, "The president's in town." And I saw Steve Wynn, who doesn't leave Las Vegas anymore.
My God.
He's blind, basically, and he was
being
led
weird
through
looking.
Right. He was being led by his assistant through the crowd.
Yeah.
And I was like, wow, it's a big deal if they made Steve come out here.
Right.
Oh, he was pissed because he couldn't get through the barricades. Oh,
exactly.
Yeah, he walked right past me. I didn't know who he was.
Yeah.
But I just want to say one thing about that house. I was also in the Epstein, the SDNY press conference when he was arrested, and nobody knew that he was going to be arrested, only the FBI. And they fired Berman, by the way. They fired the head of the SDNY who nailed him. And nobody knew that he was going to be arrested. They got him at Teterboro when his plane landed. And when they raided that apartment, that townhouse, whatever, there were 1,700 pictures of naked, semi-clothed, provocative underage girls on the wall.
Right.
That and he had this massage room that you were referring to, Noel, and he brought everybody to see the massage room. It was part of his thing. You can't have gone into that place without knowing what he was up to. It's impossible because he was so proud of it.
Well,
right?
I mean, he was proud of it, and he was also trying to entrap people, so that's why he had the pictures up in the first place. Hey, Sandi, you've done this incredible TikTok, which I'm so impressed by, because what you've done in a minute-by-minute basis is look back at January the 6th, and there's a few things that really stand out. I want to get to the thing that really stood out to me, which was the 5 sort of minutes, or maybe it was more like 15 minutes between 10 past 2 till about maybe 2:30 or so. But before we do that, what are the things that stood out to you earlier on in the day?
Well, first of all, there was no cops. I mean, I was talking to another journalist who was there, and we were in Charlottesville together, and we follow right-wing extremism. And any time that there are Proud Boys or, any kind of potential problem like that, the cops are just, they would swoop down, the DC cops swoop down on their bicycles, like you talk about jumping out of the bushes. The other 2 Stop the Steal rallies. There were dust-ups with the Proud Boys, and the one on December 12th was very violent. There were 4 stabbings involving Proud Boys. That more Proud Boys than we'd ever seen in our lives. But the cops were everywhere. And during the Kavanaugh hearings, you can't get into those buildings and protest. You can't bring a sign. And the minute you start chanting, they come and they arrest you. Yes, I mean, I was one where Amy Schumer was arrested. Amy Schumer was arrested, protesting Kavanaugh. And then when they're ready for their civil disobedience, they all sit down and they start screaming like crazy. And the cops come from everywhere and they arrest the press. Also, they tried to arrest me. So the fact that those people were in there I got there at 1 and I left at 5:30. I never saw one cop because I didn't know what was going on in the front because it was such chaos.
And you also said that at 10:30 they were there as well doing
the Proud Boys met.
So this is 2.5 hours sort of doing a reconnaissance visit around. Is that the implication there?
Well, all the people in that Proud Boys video that they arrived at 10:30 that morning at the Washington Monument, and they left at 10:41. They didn't stay there long. They were all wearing orange caps. They weren't wearing any, Fred Perry shirts. They had decided that they were going to go incognito. their leader Enrique had been arrested. I don't remember when he was arrested. It was always kind of fishy to me that he was arrested. I thought that was so he could,
But it's really interesting that at 10:30, let's just say that they were there and they sort of took a bit of a tour around the place. But then we get to what happens at around the 12:15. They sort of breach through the outer perimeter of the Capitol, right?
That 12:53, 12:55. There was a. I was on the front side, the kind of classic you look up and it's got the dome of the Capitol.
Here, I'll help you put this.
I've
changed these on the fly just before we got on the show because we had some different numbers. But
I'm sorry, and that was my bad.
So tell us exactly where you were stationed.
Okay, I was stationed. Is this the mob breaches Capitol West? Okay, I'm number 5.
Around number 5.
So I came. See, there's up at the top of your thing. There's I think that's Pennsylvania Avenue. It comes down and there's a little statue there. It looks like a little needle thing on it in the upper left-hand corner of your screen.
Right.
That is, he said, we're going to march down Pennsylvania Avenue. I'm going to be with you. And apparently that was a spontaneous suggestion because they didn't have a permit.
Oh.
They didn't have a permit.
And they did have a permit.
They marched down Pennsylvania Avenue.
But you're talking about this area right above now, which says the breaches the Capitol Hill. I wish you could see my arrow, but you can't.
Yeah, only just above it. Yeah. Breaches is just above. There's a little.
I think that's Constitution. Yeah, I think that's Constitution.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
But that's where the original breach happened. Where that statue is, we see some cars parked there in between the 211, in between number 1 and number 5. You see there's some cars parked in the far end.
It was a barricade.
That's the barricade, and that's the initial breach, right? That's at 2:53.
Yes, that was the initial breach. There were like 3 cops there or something, and they had been 12:53, and they weren't wearing any protective gear because Chris Miller had written a letter on January 4th that nobody's talking about, saying that the cops couldn't wear any protective gear, and that they had to leave the protesters alone. It was so bizarre, and they get him up there on Capitol Hill, and nobody asks him this question about the letter.
Now, I found this fascinating. I find the fact that you were able to show us in your TikTok these 5 critical moments that happened, and they only happened between 2:11 and 2:45. I think is what you said.
Yes.
So we're talking about 35 minutes of time.
It was in my it's a minute by minute breakdown of the thing. The first time the National Guard should have been called was at 12:53 because there were like thousands of people. First a small group was the group that I had filmed. All of the Proud Boys, they were named something. They were called the Mercenary Self-Defense, self-defense. They were all the people that were indicted for conspiracy. There was, Pizzola, and there was, I can't remember their names right now. But they were all the one. They were all the one, and they showed up there, and then they were the first to breach. So at 2:11. Pizzola breached right. So the right by that little those little 2 rows of trees there in your upper screen, the barricade was just by those bottom trees.
So I'm going to move the number 1 here. So we make sure we put it in the right place. Where is it? Tell me if I'm going in the right place here.
I think. Oh, that's cool. How did you do that?
It's Keynote. Yeah, basically.
Oh, I'm sorry. I really don't know, but it was the west front. So that's further. Yeah, I think it was over here, down by these trees here. But they breached this little barricade.
Right.
A little bit further down. And then they went up into the, now there were scaffolding up for the inauguration, right? There was 2 things of scaffolding.
Right.
And there were so many people there that once they broke through the main, oh God, hold on. Once they broke through the main, I'm sorry, I got a call. The main barricade, then they got up to the steps. So their goal was to get into the Capitol.
Right.
And they just started fighting with these cops. There was a handful of cops there, and they're completely outnumbered and ill-equipped to handle. So why the Capitol Police and the National Guard weren't called in when they had started this hand-to-hand combat?
Oh yeah, they should have been called in right away. It's
People
at 12:53.
died.
They should have been there beforehand. I mean, let's be completely honest. There's no way that there was no good reason to stand down the National Guard.
No.
The only reason they come up with is that they claim it was for optics. So they were concerned about, you know. But
People
I mean, what
died.
optics? Optics that you got were
died.
way worse. So, you know, I'd rather have the police standing off against these guys than allowing them in.
Chris Miller and his pals, they were put in to do exactly what they did on January 6th, November 13th. It was 11th or 13th. Trump fired everybody in all the brass in the Pentagon, and everybody goes, "What the hell is he doing that for?" Well, this is why he did it, because the police situation in DC is so bizarre that you can't call the Capitol. You have to go through a chain of command. It has to be the sergeant at arms, and so every time they'd ask for help, which is on my little thing here, they were slow walked. They were denied, out and out denied.
When do you have the first request for help actually coming down? When was it?
So this guy Sund, was he the Capitol Police guy?
I think he was the Capitol Police guy. It's correct.
Sund was
former Capitol Police guy, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah. So Sund was alerted that they had breached they'd gotten to the windows, and that was about 1 o'clock. Now Trump is still speaking now. Mm-hmm. He was an hour late. When the first breach occurred, Trump is still talking.
Right.
He was giving them cover, right?
I think he said that at 1:59 was when Sund received the first reports that rioters have breached the windows.
Yes, 1:59, right, exactly.
Breached the windows.
No, they had been fighting for 12:53, 1:53, a good hour, maybe longer, at that point. And now they're doing hand-to-hand combat. And one of my photographer friends, Stephanie Keith, was there photographing the going towards the tunnel, the famous tunnel shot, and another friend shot the guy being crushed in the tunnel. Stephanie said when she was shooting them, and she was a veteran of Charlottesville, and she said there was a bloodlust in their eyes. She'd never seen anything like that before.
Mm-hmm. Interesting.
That there was a bloodlust. So anyway, so they got up here by the number 1 area, and then they got up into the steps.
This is the rioters you're talking about.
The rioters. But what happened was that once they breached that little flimsy barricade, then thousands. You look behind it. There was thousands of people. Some say 30,000 people, and they were streaming.
So you're talking about here. It starts off here, and then at 12:53 they break through here, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Then they start making their way up here to the stairs.
Yeah. And then the cops held them at bay for a while, somewhere there on the first landing.
Yeah, I agree with you. That's sort of what happened. And then it's only at 2:11, as you see here, number 2, that they actually storm up the stairs. And now what you're adding to this mixture in here is that at 1:59, Sund receives his first report that the rioters had reached the windows. So this is when he first calls for the National Guard at 1:59. Is that correct?
He calls. No, because that wasn't he can't. You know who the only person that can call the National Guard is? Who? The President of the United States.
Okay, so then he starts going up the chain, doesn't he? I think.
And Chris Miller. Remember, Chris Miller kept saying, "Well, did you talk to the president?" He says, "I didn't need to. I was given all the authority."
Right.
Did you catch that in his interview?
I did catch that.
I was given all the authority I needed. He knew exactly what he was doing. So at 1:59. He asks, it says, at 1:34, Mayor Bowser asked Army Secretary Secretary Ryan McCarthy, another McCarthy, for federal help. She's the mayor. Mm-hmm. He reports to Miller. Right. Bowser told the request must come from the Capitol Police. So they stonewalled them.
Right, they changed the rules, right? Because instead of it being go directly, they now had to go to the Pentagon to get the permission,
so
which is never the case before.
They had the Capitol Police. I forget who says but it's not the mayor. Like normally in New York City, the mayor would call up, whatever. But it's very weird in Washington D.C. because the Capitol Police only work at the Capitol and they guard the Capitol. And
I'm sorry, I meant to say the National Guard.
Metropolitan
They had
Police.
to get to the National Guard. They had to call the Pentagon. But let's go
Yeah.
through this. So now you've got them reaching the windows. And now you said
Okay.
at 2:11, Pizzola breaks through the window to the
Pizzola
north.
breaks
And
the
it's
window,
somewhere
yeah.
around here, we think, right?
Yes.
Maybe somewhere around there.
The
Then-
window on the north.
This is the north side up here. So this is
He throws a.
This is the north
first
side.
picture you see. He throws. Yeah. Yes, exactly. He throws a. What do you call it? Shield.
rack?
Shield, a
Shield.
glass shield, like a plastic shield.
Yeah.
And so then by this time, the mob at position number 2 over here starts. This is all the way around here, all this whole area that they've gathered here. They start storming the steps where they've been held back between 12:53 and 2:11. They've been held back, but at this point, they start storming through. Is that correct?
And that's when. Oh, and there's one other thing of so 2:11. Zola, right? And at 2:12, a friend of mine, Ron Haviv, a still photographer, war photographer, was on the other side, which is the southwest.
This is number
which
2
is
over
where you
here.
have number 2.
Yes. So
Yeah.
this is the rioters are now breaking through the window over there.
Of the second, yeah, and that breach took them right to the where the officer was trying to hold back the crowd that was already inside from the other side. And he was trying to take Goodman and the hero, and he's trying to take them away from
Right.
subvert them, whatever the word is. Yeah.
Is there some thinking that these rioters at 2:12 here at the bottom at this number 2 mark, they broke in and then they maybe let some others in? Is that what I saw on your sheet? That they opened the doors for others?
Yeah. Yeah, once they got in. That's it. It's number 2. We have 2 2s.
I do, because we had to catch up and change these things at the before we started. But I can, you know what?
Oh, I'm so
I can make
sorry.
this.
Well, we're doing
3.
okay. We're doing.
I can make this a number 3.
Anyway. So confusing.
I can make this a number 4, and we'll be right there.
Okay.
So,
all right. So that at 2:12, that number 3 over there is with the blue arrow was another breach, and they all wound up. You know, the other thing about the people who went inside, I just like to say how brave they were, because my friend of mine, a woman, Aaliyah from Scootercaster, her footage is seen all the time on the news. This is FDN News. And she's a little thing, and she was so terrified to go inside because she thought they were going to start shooting. She assumed they would start
some
shooting.
of the semi-automatic weapon we discovered today. You know, we just learned that today. That walked in with a semi-automatic weapon.
Well, she said to one of the cops, she gets pushed in. You know, you don't want to get between the protesters and the cops, which she wound up. And she goes, I'm pressed. Please don't shoot me, she said.
But let's just see if I can wrap this little sheet up, and then we can have one last bit of conversation. At 2:15 then, is this correct? Is the breach on the east side. Now, this is the side that's least protected, because there's not a lot of security around here, because they planned all their security around the other side, because that's where they were coming from. That's where the protesters were coming from. So this side was a little exposed, and this mob breach is actually quite horrific. This whatever happens here on the east side is, you know, some of the worst images we've seen of the entire time.
Yes.
And this lasts on from like between 2:15 to 2:45. You said the fighting over there?
Something like that, yeah. And then I'm in front over.
You're over here somewhere, right?
Over where
the arrows
where
down?
the fight, where take the where the Capitol is and go back. There's a road there, and when I arrived, people were going over the fences. There were these green wire fences, and they were going, "Come on, patriots! It's now or never. Take back your country, and and move up. Let the men move up, and like the women stay back. And we need some fighters. You want to fight for your country." Fight for Trump. They chant, fight for Trump. So those were all like going up on in front of the Capitol. Thousands of them.
But what you're seeing essentially and then there's one last thing here. It's sort of the last thing that happened, the last move was the breach of the Capitol from the west. So they broke through the stairs up here, and they came through the top here or through the bottom, and then they broke through the west side. So literally, it almost looks like within 10 minutes, they were able to breach 4 sides of Capitol.
Yeah. Now, I want to tell you something about the Proud Boys and the Oath Keepers. I know they're not watching. They're morons. They were the soldiers. Who were the generals? General Flynn is a general.
Yeah.
This was a military, a tactical. I don't know the terms for
This
it.
was a military
a
maneuver. It
war
looks like a
game.
military maneuver
Yeah.
because they surrounded the building on all four sides, and
Within 5 minutes,
they're
minutes
able
of
to
each
break
other.
through. This is something they practiced. It's something they were in communication on. It's something that they knew they were going to do at a specific time because it all unfolded at a specific time. There's no ways you can look at this and say this is coincidental that all four sides were breached at exactly the same time.
Exactly.
It must have been a pre-rehearsed and orchestrated event.
The Oath Keepers, another thing that I plugged in, what I did was I took all of the reporting and I plugged it in. The confusion before was on some early reporting by somebody was wrong, that they said that the east side was breached earlier. But the Oath Keepers communication phone records are really interesting. Mm-hmm. So at 1 o'clock, the Oath Keepers, they make a total of 2 calls within 3-minute calls. The first search the police barricade on the grounds on the northwest side. So they started these communicating at 1 o'clock. And then there was a thing with a golf cart.
Communicating with each other?
Seth. Yeah, well, we don't know. Okay. Some people think they were guessing they were communicating with Roger Stone because we don't know. They think maybe in the White House. This is what we have to find out.
Right.
Who were the Oath Keepers communicating with? Because the guys that were the Proud Boys, whoever the lieutenants were, there were 3. This was the third Stop the Steal, and the other 2, I followed the Proud Boys and the other 2, and they at night they would go out to the mall and they would do these weird maneuvers and they would pray like they were going to war. They'd get down on a knee and they talk about if they survived.
Do you think they were practicing before when you went to see them, that they were at least surveying the land or surveying what it might look like? Wow.
Yeah. So, and they were communicating on a special channel called Boots on the Ground. You couldn't get a cell. Right. So there was some kind of app they were using.
I wonder if that was the cell was. I wonder if that was turned off for a reason. Now, let me ask you. When you said to me earlier about a golf cart, my ears perked up because there was apparently reports of a group of them that was stationed not that far away, sort of backup troops, about a mile away. That might have been the Oath Keepers. And they were stationed there just as backup if they were needed. Talk about a military operation.
Stole a golf cart. Once the first breach, I believe the timing was, once the first breach occurred, the 211 breach, they hopped in a golf cart, which they had, by the way, at that hotel. They were staying at Freedom Plaza because I filmed Roger Stone. I filmed them and Roger Stone at the speech the night before on the 5th. And the Oath Keepers were his security. And he was staying at the hotel across. No, what's that beautiful hotel across the street where Lincoln stayed? I forget the name of it. It's right across from Freedom Plaza.
I can't remember the name. I know it, but I can't
Very famous hotel. It's beautiful, magnificent hotel. So Roger Stone was staying there, and the Oath Keepers took him in, and I photographed that. But there at one point there was a golf cart with Roger Stone the next morning, the morning of the 6th, and with the Oath Keepers. So somehow they got a golf cart.
Yeah, I mean, they seem to have a pre-existing group of them stationed nearby, which I thought was fascinating in detail. As is all of this, Sandi. This is really well done. Thank you so much for putting this particular 5 minutes and 10 minutes. I think is misunderstood by people. I think it feels to everyone like it was some sort of organic, just happened thing. That yes, it was intended and they had planned to storm it, but it was it just sort of naturally unfolded. It doesn't look like this to me when I look at these 5 minutes or these 10 minutes here. It looks so coordinated. So specific.
Can I say one thing?
Yeah, absolutely. Please. Jump in.
Go ahead.
We did a show right after it happened. I think I was on your show in the 7th. But when I was watching that footage live and I saw the first wave of people that Sandi just talked about, and they took those barricades, which are called bike racks. They're called bicycle racks in like the nomenclature of police. They took those bike racks, immediately took them sideways, and started scaling the western
I
wall of
remember you
the
mentioning
Capitol.
that.
Right.
I remember
You don't
mentioning
do
it.
that by accident. That's not an improvisation kind of move. That's a plan
Right.
for it. We're going up, we're turning these things, we're turning them into ladders. You wouldn't think of that right away because they all did it in concert with each other. Like 3 or 4 of them did it at the same time.
So somewhere they had been practicing this over and over again.
They
Because to
had
do this
bulletproof
well,
vests.
to do this a
They had
coordinated way, you'd have to
They had
organize it.
bulletproof vests. All the press I had my gas mask, which I can never put on, goggles, hard hat. Uh, I don't have a bulletproof vest because I run. But all of the press had that, and all of them had. They were dressed for battle. That wasn't a normal rally.
No, that's for
And
sure.
I heard people saying, "Well, what are we supposed to do?" Like the kind of the normal people out front, where like the mom and pops. They go, "What are we supposed to do? Are we supposed to go around back?" And so they knew what they were there for. But
Yeah.
what was going to happen the next day? Were they going to move in? What was the plan?
Can I address
Yes.
Yeah,
that?
for sure.
I think they
Please.
wanted bloodshed. I think they wanted to, attack, the vice president or Pelosi or something, Nancy Pelosi. And I think
Yeah.
that those bombs were crucial. I think those pipe bombs
Good
would have
point.
gone
Yes.
off, and then Trump could have declared martial law. He could have
Martial
said,
law.
there's an attack on our country. I have to stop everything, stop the count right now. Those guys, in a way, that MAGA army was like, they were rubes, or they were sort of participating in a con that they didn't see the whole con.
Right.
Had they been successful in their in their violence, they would have gotten turned on. Trump would have turned the military on them, but he would have used that excuse to shut down the country and just sow chaos.
You're
And then he would,
absolutely right. So smart.
and he would have done what he's doing now. After he shut it down and did military law, he would have said, hey, the vote was fake anyway. Now that we're finding out this happened, Arizona doesn't count, Georgia doesn't count, and he would have thrown it out, and we would have still been dealing with it. We would have had an acting President Trump right now.
And that was their plan. I mean, that was their plan. I'm going to see if I can find this tape that I put together of this timeline. They had said so many times. Their intention was martial law and that President Trump would still be the president after that date.
Yes.
They said it, and I have it on tape, and I'll play it for you just before we leave the show, at least in a few minutes if I can find it. But it's such a, you're so right. This was the.
You know what QAnon was saying? I'm sorry to interrupt you, but exactly what Noel said. On the 12th of December, this QAnon woman said, I said, what do you think about all this? And she goes, General Flynn is supposed to tell Donald Trump to declare martial law and have a new election overseen by the military.
Right.
Yeah,
it would have been a
exactly
junta. It would have been a military junta.
I said, well, you could move to Venezuela.
Right.
Could just
it's basically that. And the person who was involved in all of that, the person who said at the beginning, one of the persons who said at the beginning, we're not going to, we're not going to accept the election results, were Kevin McCarthy, were Lindsey Graham, and Ted Cruz. So all these big shots within the Republican Party were right there preparing for this coup. They were intending to take a coup. No wonder they don't want to have an investigation.
Right.
Because they were involved in a coup attempt.
And their role in it in the weeks leading up to January 6th was to gin up base, was to put the anger in those folks that would then attack the Capitol.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
Digital soldiers.
So, it's kind of clear. It's kind of clear that, and we can't ignore it.
Wow.
Because not only is it clear to me that the Republican Party was involved, it's also clear to me that the military was involved. A big chunk of the military was aware of what was going on that day. There's no ways they didn't send in the National Guard because of optics. They didn't send the National Guard because they wanted to let them into the building. They wanted the insurrection. They wanted the coup, because without the coup, they couldn't declare martial law. So they needed the events to happen. Those incredible four-pronged attack from every side of the Capitol. They needed it to happen, and that's why there was no National Guard. And the poor Capitol Police stuck in the middle there, fighting off this entire throng. They were left there by the military, left there to die if they needed to, so these guys could get in and have their little political show. I mean, it's clear to me that's exactly what happened.
You're absolutely right.
And how long did it take,
we have
Sandi,
to get to the bottom.
How long did it take before the police actually did come, the National Guard?
At 5:30.
5:30.
I'm telling you, this is what happened. So at 4:10, there's a couple of videos that I did that I sent to you a while ago. one of them wound up in the congressional record during the impeachment hearing, where the guy was reading Trump's tweet. Trump tweeted it. I mean, this is like 5 shows worth of stuff. He tweeted at 2:24 saying that Mike Pence didn't have the courage.
Right.
Meanwhile, they were already inside. He was encouraging them to fight, to keep fighting.
When did they say it? At what time did he tweet that?
2:24, he tweeted it.
So this is within 5 minutes, within 10 minutes of them breaching every side of the Capitol, which we just saw just now.
He tweets for the first time.
He tweets so that they should go after Pence. They're inside for the first
he didn't
time.
Have
And
the courage.
On that moment, he's coordinated enough to know that they're inside, and he can then say, go after Pence. I mean, just think about that.
Right. And let's also mention that Lauren Boebert is tweeting the speaker is no longer in the chamber.
Right.
She's giving inside operations via social media as to the whereabouts. You know?
Wow. I think that's I hadn't thought about that 10-minute gap that they just breached.
Yeah.
And then, we just heard from the New York Times reporter who did this book on the Secret Service that when Pence gets downstairs to the bunker, they don't have the key. The Secret Service does not have the key. So he's sitting there as a target.
You're kidding.
Yes. And we just heard that today. So, wow, that's insane when you think about the president of the United States, former president of the United States, giving this mob directions as soon as they step inside the Capitol, and then telling them to go after the vice president who is attempting to get into a bunker downstairs, but cannot get into the bunker because the Secret Service, which has sworn allegiance to Trump for some reason, has not got the keys over there. Yeah, they were wearing MAGA hats. Wow.
Yeah, MAGA hats.
Wow.
And then, so at 4:10, a guy comes out, and that guy actually got indicted from my video with the Bullhorns, another show, the Bullhorn people.
I remember him.
And he says, I have a message from the president. This is 4:10 p.m. And he goes, and now they're kind of straggling out, and people are, coughing, and they're bloody, and it's kind of like winding down, but they're still fighting. And this guy says, I have a message from the president, and then he reads the tweet. Says Mike Pence doesn't have the courage, right? And then he encourages them to keep fighting. It's unconstitutional what he did to not decertify the votes. And then 10 minutes later, who was inside with a bullhorn says, Mayor Bowser wanted to send in the National Guard, and the Defense Department said, no, thank you. Who said that?
Yeah. How did they know that? How did they get that information? I bet you that was General Flynn's brother who was in that Zoom meeting and who knew that the events. Yeah. So I think that's what happened. Sandi, thank you so much. You're amazing. So appreciate you joining us tonight, and we'll have you back on. We'll talk some more in the near future about your incredible discoveries, and hopefully we'll have some tape when you come on the show.
Yes, promise.
Thank you so much. I'm going to get Noel back up here. Thank you so much. She's so amazing. I love Sandi so much. What a talented journalist she is. We're so lucky to have her in our community. The show's almost over, but we have to talk about one last thing, because you said you were going to talk to me about it, and I can't believe you actually have sorry, Sandi, bye.
UFO story?
A UFO story. Egads. What's in the sky? I don't know why people are so obsessing about the UFO thing. I know there was a 60 Minutes thing, and I know everyone thinks that now the aliens are coming, but apparently you've seen them. You've spotted them.
Yeah. It's like all this stuff that's like, I don't talk about this much, but where I grew up in the 80s in the Hudson Valley was known for UFO sightings. I come from a town called Putnam Valley. It's a very kind of blue collar, red state kind of area in upstate New York. So it's not the kind of people that would be given to like being like, I saw a UFO. Like, it's not a new agey type place.
Yeah.
And there was UFO sightings all the time in the 80s. I sent you all those New York Times articles.
Yeah, you did.
So it's something like, it's been no mystery to me for a long time. And I don't need to proselytize on it. My personal belief is it's probably more like technology that was developed here somewhere, and like somebody's keeping it super secret than it necessarily is like UFOs. But I'll tell you a story. I mean, we don't know what they are, but I don't know that it's aliens. But so in my town, very commonplace. The cops would see it. All these people would see it. One day we're driving up this road called Lake Oscawana Road, which is this main road in Putnam Valley. And my buddy's dad, who's like a Vietnam vet, is driving, a bunch of his son's teenage friends in the back of this car. And we see it. we see it above the road,
wow.
like a saucer, like a big flying saucer way up in the sky,
Wow.
moving. And we're like, oh my God, look at that. So we pull off the road into the Putnam Valley Elementary School parking lot, and we get out and we look at this thing. This guy's dad is like deer hunter, hardcore, Republican, like Vietnam vet guy. And he's like, guys, I don't know what that is. I was in Vietnam. Like, I've seen every kind of like aircraft our military has. That ain't anything like our government has.
Wow.
I don't know what it has. And we're like, oh my God. And it took off, right? So we
Took
we
off
get
like
back
really
in the
quickly. Like
station
just
wagon.
was there for a
Gone.
second and then gone. Wow.
Gone.
Wow,
Right?
interesting.
No noise either. Right? The same description as you hear now. Exactly. I saw exactly the same thing. So we back in the car, we drive up, he drops us off to the lake, where we sit by the lake on a dock and drink beer. It's like a summer night or whatever. This is like late 80s. And we're telling our friends about it. We're like, the friends that were already there, we're like, you guys missed it, dude. We saw a UFO. Billy's dad even saw it. Like, it was totally a UFO. And we're telling our buddies about it. And then our one friend goes, there it is. And we turned around, and it was now above the lake, but not far away. It was like right above the lake. It was the size of like 10 football fields, massive,
Oh no,
completely silent, all these lights going around it, like not making any sound, but all these sort of pulsating lights around the middle.
It's circular thing.
Yes, in the middle. And the one thing I could say about it that was weird was that in my recollection, and even in that day, there was colors in the lights that I hadn't seen before, if that made any sense.
No, it doesn't make
like
sense to me. What does that mean?
I know. There was colors in the spectrum that my brain couldn't like process, like not green, not red, not yellow. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
like,
I know what you're saying. I just can't imagine what that looks like because I wasn't there. But
it was like a color beyond purple, and it was like a different color that was like, what the hell is that? And anyway, the whole thing was there for a minute or two, and we couldn't believe it. I mean, awe-inspiring, gigantic. Whereas earlier we had seen it way high in the sky. Now it was
it following you?
Us. No, the lake was where they had a research center in the 80s. Okay. The lake, for some reason, was like an attractive thing for UFOs. That's why this town had so many sightings. For something underneath that lake, I don't know what. So
maybe whoever was building it, if it's not a traditional alien ship, as one would expect with UFOs, maybe it was a human creation. Maybe being built in the research center or under the lake or something.
Who knows? You know what I mean? But we're all like freaking out. It's sitting there, and then it just disappeared. Like,
it is amazing to me that they always look the same. I mean, you always hear the same description. They always have this, circular thing, like you see in this graphic over here, with a light in the middle.
Just
sometimes
like that.
People get get pulled up and I guess probed in it, whatever the situation was.
Right.
But it's amazing to me that it's been the same picture since the 1950s. Like the same image. So it makes me sometimes a little skeptical about UFOs. I'm not a big believer that the aliens are here. And for someone who's kind of accused of being a conspiracy theorist a lot of the time, I can say that this one I just find just too far. And the fact that it could happen all at the same time is tricky for me. For me to think that, Donald Trump, coronavirus, and UFOs all arriving at the same time, that's too much going on for a short period of time, plus climate change. But and can I just say, I don't think it's aliens. I think it's something that was developed at Area 51 or something that the Russians came up with, some different kind of propulsion that's sort of been under wraps for a long time, but needs to be used. So they take it out and fly it around. I think it's probably tied into Area 51 and stuff. I don't think it's little green men. I think it's something that was made terrestrially. I think it was something that was made here that has a military value that they can't let people know about. And they fly them out around and test runs and just pretend like it doesn't exist, I can't believe how willing people are to sort of abandon themselves into a UFO future, though. I'm always surprised by how everyone is like, oh my God, the UFOs is the UFOs now, and they sort of accept it as a real possibility. It's probably not happening. Right. It's probably not happening. It's okay. That thing is probably not happening right now. But who knows? I've said that many times in the last 5 years. No, I'll keep talking to you forever, and you've got to go, and I've got to go. It's been a great show. My thanks to Sandi Bacon for joining us with a brilliant TikTok. What a great resource that is. Hope people pay attention to those 5 minutes, even that full hour between 2 and 3 p.m. on January the 6th. I'll be back on Friday with the after show. And until then, we wish you a very good night. Good night, Noel.
Thank you.
Narrative is funded by viewers like you. Support our independent journalism at patreon.com/narrative. Tonight's show is brought to you by Helix Sleep, and they have a special offer for Narrative viewers. I've heard it from so many people. The one thing that's changed since January is their sleep. Not waking up worrying about what the president might have done or said or tweeted makes the world of a difference. I don't think I had a good solid night's sleep in 4 years. And it wasn't only the president. My 10-year-old mattress, which started life as a 12-inch foam mattress, had shrunk to an 8-inch mattress, and getting out of bed was often more of a slide than a bounce. It was time for a new mattress. Helix Sleep has a quiz that takes just 2 minutes to complete and matches your body type and sleep preferences to the perfect mattress for you. Why would you buy a mattress made for somebody else? Changing the course of a country can take a village. Changing the course of your sleep takes a quiz. Helix is offering up to $200 off all mattress orders and 2 free pillows for our listeners at helixsleep.com/narrative. That's the way we spell narrative, N-A-R-A-T-I-V. That's helixsleep.com/narrative for up to $200 off and 2 free pillows just for you.